I would like to say a few words about my country of England and its government. I believe I've lived long enough to have earned the right to have my say. I hit the big 7-0 at the end of this year. And I might as well say it now because free speech is under attack in this country. Well, no, let's be very honest. Free speech is now gone. We don't have it, despite what our Prime Minister tells the US President. And didn't he look uncomfortable when he was telling him, oh, we do have it, we've had it for years, and indeed we're very proud of it. Mind you, let's not fool ourselves. Trump knows the reality. He's kept very well informed. So what do you think of our country now? What do you imagine is the rest of the world's opinion of England as she is today? I think most of us would have a very poor opinion of England in these days. We were, about 100 years ago, arguably one of the greatest nations on earth, which is why we were called Great Britain. For such a small island to rule 1/4 of the globe, the largest empire ever known. But what about today? Honestly, we are the laughingstock of Europe, and I'm quite sure the rest of the world is sniggering up their sleeves at us. And to be fair, they have every right. Great Britain in all her glory, reduced to a joke. Today we are pathetic, not great in any sense, a modern-day laughingstock. But here's the question, and it needs to be posed. Whose fault is it? Who is to be to blame? Because clearly someone is. Is it the postman? Or maybe the guy at the railway station who sells our train tickets? No? Okay, the dinner lady. The black cab taxi driver. The plumber? Nurses? Shop assistants? Bus drivers? Vets? Delivery drivers? Cooks in pubs? No. And I could go on and on and on, but only one group of people are responsible. Politicians. Both parties, they're both as bad as each other. Well, no party, no Prime Minister has caused quite as much damage as the present one. He will go down in history. The worst Prime Minister this country has ever had in just over 800 years. That's some achievement. No, they will scream and divert attention away from themselves, but they are the ones holding the reins. The buck stops, as they say, with them. They squirm and oil themselves around us to make promises with big grins on their faces to get our votes, and then, having fooled us all, do precisely what they want. They break all their promises and instead pursue their own dark, hidden political agenda. We vote them into Parliament and our tax money pays their wages. They are voted for by the public to represent us, the voting public, to serve us by producing a healthy economy, a country that has a central place on the world stage, a military that can protect us, and a police force that upholds common law and order to punish the criminal. While those sitting in the House of Commons would hate to have to admit it, but politicians are our servants. They serve the Crown and us. So what do you see happening to our once great nation? Not looking good, is it? For one, I point my finger straight at the government and in particular our Prime Minister. I mean, come on, the clue's in the job title, Prime Minister. Of all the politicians, he's the one in charge. A few days ago, a barrister YouTuber showed us something very interesting. Starmer very proudly told us that he'd promised 1,000 extra doctors and that is what he had delivered. Except, as the gentleman pointed out, that all depended on an understanding of the definitions used and on the clever use of statistics. And it wasn't 1,000 doctors at all, but only about 800. Okay, well that's better than nothing, but then why not just say that? we have an extra 800 doctors. You see, a half-truth masquerading as a complete truth is an utter lie. But I would not expect anything less. The democratic process is an anathema to him. And regardless of your views on us leaving the European Union, he is taking us back in against the majority vote. And now, very recently, it's been announced that a special task force of police are to be employed to monitor our social media posts. Surveillance to see if we are saying anything untoward towards our guests. But frankly, why should we say anything to them or make any threats at all? Leave them alone. I know this sounds dumb, but actually they haven't done anything. Okay, they've entered the country illegally, but seriously, if the government makes their entry into this country so easy, that's not their fault. They're just taking full advantage of a very poor and weak national security. In one regard, you can't blame them. If they barge their way onto our trains without paying, go into high-end shops and stores, and steal hundreds, if not thousands of pounds of goods without being stopped, then you can't blame them. Our Prime Minister has made this country far too inviting. Why wouldn't they want to come, especially compared to where they have come from? I mean, 3 square meals a day, beautiful hotel rooms, bed, the rooms are changed and cleaned, spending money, free and prompt health care. They are not the fools. Of course, we draw the line when our women and children are at risk, and they are. But let us remind our Prime Minister that this is something he should be concerned about. And I'm quite sure that matter keeps him up every single night. And yet, the left wing label and smear concerned mothers as hate-filled far-right racists. Seriously, any fair, monitored, open-air debate to defend that charge would fail. It would fall to the ground, and I hope that deep, deep down they would secretly know that. To not see it would mean they've got an IQ that barely crawls into double figures, or they're just brainwashed. In a court of law, that charge could not be defended. Racist. The left wing have weaponized that word and they use it at every opportunity they get, simply because it's the only argument they've got. Even Starmer labelled the protesters far right, but then of course backpedaled furiously and said, oh no, it was just the press. Did you believe him? And dare I say, if the Prime Minister can afford to employ police to monitor the public social media, then that only shows that he's clearly winning the war against crime and lawlessness hands down. He must have police standing around idle, twiddling their thumbs. That must be the case, right? Because policing social media would not be a priority over knife crime, robbery, violence and rape. Certainly, crimes that are not confined to our guests alone in this nation. I'm quite sure our Prime Minister is ordering this as an extra level of security, right? All the first threats having been successfully dealt with. I mean, that has to be the case. That's what a reasonable government would do, right? Surely men and women join the police to fight real hardcore crime and defend the public and uphold and support society. But the fact is, we are seeing more and more of it, that the police are being told to become a political police force, to come down on dissension and those having the wrong opinion. And yes, Essex police escorted far-right agitators to where peaceful demonstrators were gathered, knowing full well that their presence might be inflammatory. And if that was the case, then shame on them. If that was the case. But with our present government, nothing would surprise me. Can you imagine us even being able to discuss this. I'm sure Robert Peel and Dixon of Dock Green would be so proud of you. I'm quite sure that were they alive today, they would agree that spying on your countrymen is far more important than really taking on the criminal. I joke, but you get the gist. People ask the question, are these politicians thick? Are they dumb? Well, clearly no. They've had the nous to climb their way to the top to their particular pile of dung. They have degrees, so they're not stupid in the strictest sense of the word. No, it's something far worse than that. The Labour Party is the political left wing, along with groups like Antifa. The left wing, the Latin for left is sinistro, from which we derive the word sinister, and that sums up the left wing, sinister. They aren't stupid, they're sinister. There's an underlying darkness, shady deals going on, and what is undeniable is that they have an agenda they don't want questioned or even spoken about. Employ the police as a political baton, silence dissension, use fear against your voting public, control them. As Noam Chomsky once said, the smart way to keep people obedient and passive is to strictly limit the spectrum of debate, yet within that narrow spectrum allow lively discussion. And we're seeing that with reference to Islamophobia. A preacher was arrested a few days ago for asking a group of women a question. They'd set up a stall to promote something to do with women. He was arrested for a hate crime because a man who was not seen originally, nor did not want to be identified, reported that the man was aggressive and abusive. All charges were dropped, but the point remains. A man was able to rise up out of nowhere and claim harassment, alarm and distress. Those three words have become a weapon, and they will be used, even if it means lying, to get someone arrested. But this has grown out of the current government, and they have actively and positively promoted this. But consider the word hate crime. Hate. Has the definition of hate changed since I was a child? One definition that has changed is that of race. Today the word race is used where, strictly speaking, it should be nationality. I'm quite sure eventually one could be labelled as a racist for criticising someone from another county. Another word that has been fully misunderstood is phobia. Phobia, an extreme or irrational fear. Tell me, do you think anyone was afraid deep down of getting on a bus or a tube train on the 8th of July, 2005? The left wing are a strange bunch. Corbyn, Abbott, et al. Have all made anti-Semitic comments. On July 2019, 350 Labour ministers were expelled for anti-Semitic behaviour. They join hands with Palestine in standing against Israel and would love to see the destruction of Israel and all Jewish people. And yet, the left wing call those who oppose such views as Nazis. Never forget it was Hitler's National Socialist Party, and incidentally, Hitler's plans for Europe and those drawn up by the EU are virtually identical. So what is Starmer's agenda? I don't know. I can only hazard a wild stab in the dark. If we were to view the Labour Party's reluctance to upset a certain community, then I sincerely believe that one or two things will happen. Either Starmer will cancel any future general election, or more likely he will give the vote to our guests, and he will be returned to office in perpetuity. It'd be like Khan, the Mayor of London. It doesn't matter what he does or does not do, he has a captive voter base, and that can be relied upon. He could sit in his office and pick his nose all day, and would still be returned to power every time. The point is always made that those that arrive day after day after day are all male and of fighting age. Okay, that could be for any number of reasons, and let us not forget our government servants have allowed them to enter, and indeed have made the cost and risk of getting here very attractive. Again, they can't be blamed for that. Maybe, and it's a wild thing to say, but maybe Starmer secretly wants them to come here. I don't know, but it's a question, it's one possibility. They are given a choice of mobile phones so they can all keep in contact, a place to live, sometimes a very nice place to live, free food, 3 times a day, laundry and room cleaning, and cash to put in their hands every week. So really, we can't blame them for wanting to get here. But what if, just if, one day they all received the order to attack? They're all fighting age men. What could we do if 600,000-700,000 men were rushing out and randomly attacking us? We would be defenseless. And dare I say, by that time, any retaliation or criticism will be deemed unlawful. I'm not saying this is going to happen, only to pose the question, what would happen if it did with this government? I wonder if our Prime Minister wants to burn this country to the ground, metaphorically speaking, so that he can proudly lower the crown on his own head and rule over the ashes. I've said it often and for a long time now. The people of this country are going to get the land the politicians so richly deserve.